Hi folks, and welcome to today's video. A lumbar herniation. The doctor says operate, the physio says wait. Who to trust, who to believe. Okay, let's dive in. You've just come out of the doctor's office. He said you need an operation on your lumbar spine for your disc herniation. The day before, you were speaking to your physio and he said, no, let's wait, okay? You're the one lying wide awake at 2 a.m. in the morning thinking, what on earth am I gonna do? What's my long-term prognosis, okay? Who do I believe? Who's correct? All right, let's dive into today's video and find out. So you've come here today because you're in that dilemma, all right? The doctor has told you you need an operation, okay? But then this physiotherapist has said, oh, no, I think we can manage this with conservative care. Who do you trust? You're lying there in bed late at night trying to figure out which ones you're gonna do, what's the prognosis, okay? What's the best decision to make? All right. Okay guys, listen, before we get into it, a little bit about my history. I actually herniated my L5S1 twice, about 19 years apart. Numerous other injuries, lumbar herniations, cervical issues as well. With my experience of strength and conditioning, rehabilitation, I've brought myself back from all those injuries numerous times, pain-free, no surgery, with conservative care. I make a lot of content today for people out there suffering with these conditions to get them back on the road to pain-free living. So subscribe right now for more great content if that is you out there suffering with those problems, okay? Now let's get into this. So basically both of those answers are technically correct, okay? Because you have to look at the context of the person who has been asked the question, right? So if you've said to the surgeon, hey, can you operate? Should we operate, right? The surgeon, he wants to get you out of pain, okay? A surgeon, that's his job, is operating, right? So he's very happy to, most of them anyway, are happy to go ahead and do it. That's what he's trained to do, all right? When you speak to the physiotherapist, his job is using conservative care is to get you out of pain. It is to get you, having a more productive life, okay? Being able to do more, right? So neither's really lying to you. They're just replying from their side of the fence. Okay, Colin, that's great, but who's right? Who do I trust, okay? Well, the operation is going to be a quicker way out of pain. When I first herniation, I was offered the chance for an operation. It could have happened within a week, right? But I was like, no, I've read the research. I would rather, go through conservative care and work on this, myself, yeah? And what they've discovered is with, surgery versus conservative care, typically, yes, it's quicker to get out of pain with surgery, but the overall outcomes 2 to 3 years later, there is no difference, right? Generally, 80 to 90% of people from low back disc herniation will recover with conservative care without the need for an operation and will become pain-free, okay? But, and there's a big but, there's a caveat, there are some non-negotiable situations where surgery is most definitely necessary, right? If the person's pain is increasing, okay, nerve pain's getting worse, they've got a loss of feeling down the leg, okay, with sciatica, of course. If they're getting a progressive, what's called weakness, like poof, it's like starting to give way the leg, foot drop, which is where the foot starts to drop, you can't lift the toes right up towards the knee anymore, okay? Those need emergency surgery care, okay? Loss of bladder control, bowel control, it might seem obvious, but those are severe nerve implications. They have to be addressed. That's urgent, okay? Because if you don't, this can be irreparable nerve damage and you could be left with some serious issues, okay? So those are the non-negotiable times when you will most likely, definitely need surgery. When you want, is a good example actually, is my father-in-law. He had nerve pain and it was getting reported to me over the phone by my wife. And I said, oh, it sounds very much like a L2, L3, L3, L4. It's like femoral nerve pain running down the front of his thigh. Anyway, goes in to see the doctor and he wanted to do a fusion. And I'm just like, no, this does not need a fusion. He's not in anywhere near shape or form for that procedure. Anyway, he brushed it off, spoke to another doctor friend of his who said, no, you don't need that, go physiotherapy route. And he did with some conservative physiotherapy and some decompression work. He's back. I saw him a few weeks ago, walking perfectly normal. He's back to being in good shape again, yeah? So there's definitely times when it's required surgery, but in many cases it can be overused, yeah? Now, the decision-making questions yourself, okay? You've got to ask yourself, okay, is my nerve pain improving, right? Stagnating or worsening, okay? I'm able to do more, okay? Am I doing more exercises week upon week? Am I doing more repetitions week upon week? And it can take, 4 to 6, 6 to 8 weeks to start to see improvement, okay? So you want to give the conservative care a good amount of time to see if you're improving. Okay, if you're getting better, then stick with it, right? If you appear to have plateaued, don't say, right, throw in the towel immediately, right, and stagnated. Very often plateauing just means you need to change up the routine, change up the exercises, change intensity, change volume, in some cases change physios. That also will have a bearing impact as well, okay? So you've got to ask yourself those questions. Improving, stagnating, worsening. Okay, if you are getting worse and worse and worse, okay, speak to the physio and say, look, this is not getting worse. Okay, let's go back and talk to the doctor, right? Obviously ask yourself, look, what happens if I stick it out another 2 weeks, 3 weeks, okay? And see if I suddenly get past that stagnant area or actually it improves, okay, maybe an extra couple of days off and boom, the nerve pain goes down. It just needed a bit of extra rest, which is very, very common as well, okay? As far as the surgery route, you've got to ask yourself, what's the likelihood of me needing more surgeries in the future, right? Re-herniation risk, okay? Now, depending on the literature that you read, re-herniation can occur at 20 to 40%, I think it's 20, 40, sometimes 42 in certain cases. So they get the surgery, within 18 months, 2 years, 3 years, it's re-herniated again. And then the more times you're getting operated on, the chance of having to get a full-on fusion do become much higher, okay? And if you are an athlete, if you've got, spondylolisthesis, if you've got some, genetic predisposition, what are the chances of re-herniating again? Like if I go the surgery route, is my chance greater now than if I stick with the conservative route? Like for me, for example, I've got spondylolisthesis, I've got a shift in my vertebra, L5, S1, shifted 8 millimeters, okay? So I am more likely, more prone to getting a herniation, L5, S1. I've got a deformation in my hips, which came from a traumatic birth. So basically I had more chance than I do of torn labrums, femoral acetabular impingement syndrome, okay? And it's always going to be there. So I can address it with physiotherapy. Even if I get a surgery, it's not going to change unless I start shaving bone and all this kind of stuff and I'm in crutches for 4 months and it's almost a year of rehab. Do I want to put myself through that with no absolute that it's going to be fixed? No, I don't, okay? You have to ask yourself these questions. Another horrific story, but I'll tell you, okay, because you want input. I had a guy, I won't tell you where from. Anyway, he was under surgery for a herniated disc and some other things that were supposed to happen within this procedure. Within a month, he felt exactly the same, if not worse. Goes to see another surgeon, okay? And he's telling this story, and I'm thinking, well, if you've had that done in the first surgery, there's no way you'd be feeling this in such a short space of time, okay? Goes to the next surgeon, gets an MRI. The guy's like, that first surgeon, he did not do what he said he did. He sent me the original surgeon's reports because they have to fill in what it is they've done in the procedure, and it hadn't been done. Like the second surgeon said, look, this has not been done. The guy didn't do it. He went in and did whatever the other thing he did. He didn't do all this stuff. Now that's crazy to think that, right? There was no liability, simply because that particular country is what we call a white mafia. It's where the white coats all get together and say, no, it was all done under the best practice at the time, blah, 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 blah. Okay, so there is risks with surgery. There really are. So if you want to take a quick route, okay, please understand you're going under the knife, under anesthetic. There are huge risks, okay? Not just of the surgery itself, but of course of it failing and you not feeling any better down the line. Now myself, I didn't have surgery. I had the choice, okay? But I refused it. I didn't want to go that route. I wanted to try the conservative care route because I was improving. But I'm not you, okay? So, the conditions can be different, etc. So you have to ask yourself all these questions, okay? I know plenty of people, as I said, who've been operated on, it didn't, things didn't work out, either from back surgery, meniscus surgery, shoulder surgery, okay? And they come with these horrible outcomes like I just spoke about as well. Look, if you're in no immediate danger, right, I would always try to exhaust the conservative care option. Even if it's not just rehab, it's like, cryotherapy, PRP, there's plasma lysate is another one which is going around now as well. There's a lot of different things you can try if you have access to these things, okay, before throwing in the towel and going the surgery route. But don't get me wrong, I've read many stories and heard people as well who've had surgery and never looked back. 20 years later, they're still in great condition, great shape, no issues, okay? So it is a lot of things to think about. But as I said, try conservative care first, stick with it and see how you go. And, if it does get worse, it's not improving, then yes, go back, speak to the doc and have a good solid conversation with the doctor and also your family, all right, to establish or have a think about the ramifications going forward of your recovery time as well, because obviously recovery time, the first month or so, you're typically doing very little, okay, maybe some pool work, gentle bracing, before you start embarking on a pure rehabilitation program, all right? So I hope I've given you some food for thought in this video. If you do have any questions, comments, please hit me up in the comment section down below. If you'd like to speak to me and ask me some more questions, you can also book in for a free advice call. It takes 45 minutes, 1 hour. We chat on video call, and you can ask me anything you want, okay? I can give you some advice, tips, hints. If you're suffering out there with a low back pain problem, herniated disc, bulging disc, etc., I'm here to help as many people as possible get back on the road to pain-free living. So please don't forget to share, like, and subscribe, and I'll see you next time. Have a great day.